Hi everyone. I'm Helen from Susan's family. Today, I'm sharing with you the animals in Dream Blanket, the sheep design. It consists of a main fabric piece, an edging, and some decorations. Let's start by crocheting the main part. Once done, we'll work the edge in rounds along the borders. Lastly, we'll make and attach the decorative elements. First, we'll crochet the main fabric piece. We'll use the diagonal crochet technique by increasing stitches first until we reach the desired length, which corresponds to the diagonal at the center of the fabric square. Then we decrease stitches, creating a square shape as we work back and forth. Throughout, we'll join new yarns and switch colors to create the desired pattern. Techniques involved include chains, double crochets, and slip stitches. Please let me demonstrate the specific crochet method. For better visibility, I'll be using chunky yarn for this demonstration. The colors are chosen randomly. For specific yarn details, color schemes, and hook sizes, please refer to the product page and pattern instructions. Let's start by casting on. Pick up the yarn with your right hand and wrap it around your left little finger. Pass it through the space between your index and middle fingers. Use your left thumb and middle finger to pinch the yarn end. Now, pick up the crochet hook with your right hand. Move the hook between these 2 points. Position the hook underneath the yarn. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise around the hook. There's a loop on the hook now. Pinch the crossing point of the loop with your left hand. Keep the hook on the left side of the yarn. Wrap the yarn. Draw the yarn through. This slip knot does not count as a stitch. Tighten the yarn end. Now, start crocheting a chain. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through again. That's 1 chain. Make 2 more chains. Including the starting chain. Altogether, you'll have 3 chains. Next, crochet a fabric piece. Start with the first row. Chain 3 as the turning chain. Then, insert your hook into the stitch next to the turning chain, which is the 4th chain. Counting from the right. Remember, don't include the loop on your hook while counting. You can see that the chain forms a V-shaped braid on the right side. On the wrong side, there will be a ridge, the small raised horizontal bar. We'll work into the corresponding chain from the right side. Insert into the strand on top. Let me point out the position for you. That means picking up this particular strand. Insert your hook and crochet. Yarn over once. Insert into the correct spot. Wrap the yarn around the hook. Draw the yarn through. Now, you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over again. Pass through the first 2 loops. You'll be left with 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and draw through. And there's your double crochet. Let me demonstrate the double crochet again. Yarn over. Pick up the top strand of the chain on the left. Yarn over and draw through. Then, wrap the yarn around again. Pass through the first 2 loops on the hook. Repeat this twice. Once. Twice. Make 1 double crochet into the next chain. Treat these 3 chains and 3 double crochets as one group of pattern. The first row has only one group, and that completes the first row. Move on to the second row. Start from where you left off in the previous row. Begin by making 3 chains. When working back and forth, turn the work counterclockwise. Then pick up these 3 chains. Make one group. Start with 3 chains again. At this point, the back side of the chain should face you. Pick up the top strand of the chain. That's the thread above the little ridge on the chain. Make 3 double crochets one by one. If you're unsure about the placement, you can count from the right side of the chain. Once that's done, one group is complete. Then, slip your hook through the first group, next to the turning chain, into the large chain space, which is right here. Go through this large chain space. Make a slip stitch. Yarn over, draw the yarn through, and pull through all loops on the hook. The slip stitch is complete. Now, make another group right here. Start with a chain of 3. Into the same chain space, make 3 double crochets. Once that's done, the second row is finished. You've crocheted 2 groups in this row. Move on to the third row. Begin with chaining 3. Then, turn your work. Pick up these 3 chains and make a group. Make sure the wrong side of the chain is facing you. Insert your hook into the top strand to crochet. You'll notice that every row starts with chaining 3. Follow that by turning your work and crocheting the group pattern. Each following row will have the same starting method. I won't go into details later. When finished, make a slip stitch into the next adjacent group. Find the gap between the turning chain and the double crochet. That's the space right next to the turning chain. Crochet a slip stitch. Insert your hook into the space. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through. Pass through all the loops on your hook at once. Complete the slip stitch. Then work into the same chain space. Crochet a group. After that, continue with the gap of the next adjacent group. From now on, the gap of a group always refers to the space between the turning chain and the double crochet. I won't go into details later. Insert your hook into the gap. Make another slip stitch. And then crochet a group here. Once you've completed that, the third row is finished. In this row, we've crocheted 3 groups. You can see the texture of this row. It corresponds to the first row. This is the right side of the fabric. The texture of the double crochets is quite neat. When distinguishing the right and wrong sides later on, you can refer to the texture. Also, make sure the yarn tail is at the bottom right corner. Now, let's move on to the fourth row. Follow the same method as before. Start by making one group. After completing it, slip stitch into the gap of the adjacent group. Move on to the second group. Align the position of the following groups accordingly. Use a slip stitch to transition between groups. Keep crocheting. Once you've finished the last group, the fourth row will be complete. In this row, there are 4 groups in total. Proceed to crochet rows 5 through 10. Follow the same technique as before. Make groups back and forth. With each new row added, increase the number of groups in a row by 1. Please refer to the previous demonstration. And complete these remaining rows. After finishing the 10th row, check the measurements with the pattern instruction. Once that's done, crochet the 11th row. Starting with this row, we need to incorporate yarns of different color. Please refer to the grid pattern for details. Each square represents one group pattern. Use the previous yarn to work 10 groups exactly as indicated. Upon completing them, you'll reach the final group spot. At this point, you'll introduce the new color. First, bring the old yarn to the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure it's the wrong side of the entire piece. Then, pick up the corresponding color yarn. From here on, the colors are chosen randomly. Refer to the pattern instruction for specifics. Tie a slip knot with the new yarn. Leave the previous loop on your hook. Insert the hook into the gap between the adjacent groups. Pull the loop from the slip knot through. Draw the yarn through all the loops on the hook. You've now completed a slip stitch. And at the same time, you've joined the new yarn. Just give it a gentle tug. Make sure the knot doesn't show on the right side. Then, work with the new color. Crochet a group pattern. As you crochet, keep the short yarn tail above the hook. Tuck it in as you go along. Once done, row 11 will be complete. Next, move on to row 12. At the start, you'll need to use the previous yarn, which is the color you switched from in row 11. Since this yarn will be needed in the following row, at its corresponding position, we'll keep it aside for now. To maintain aesthetics and ease future crocheting, reattach the yarn here. A skein has two tails, one on the surface and one in the center. If you only have one skein, you can use the other tail to join the yarn. If you have multiple skeins, you can simply use another skein to join. Tie a slip knot. Insert your hook into the previous loop. Place the loop of the slip knot onto the hook. Draw the yarn through. Adjust slightly. Then, crochet a group pattern. After turning the work, due to the abundance of yarns, you can tidy up the loops to avoid forming knots. When finished, slip stitch into the gap. Here, at the adjacent group, you need to switch color. Put the previous yarn to the wrong side of the fabric. Then, insert through the gap. Next, pick up the corresponding yarn. Before changing colors, tighten the yarn slightly. At this point, the yarn tail should be along the edge. Make sure to pull the yarn from the wrong side of the fabric. Insert the hook into the gap. Yarn over and pull the yarn through. Draw through all loops on the hook at once. Complete the slip stitch. And you've also changed colors. Then make one group. For the next group, another color change is needed. Again, use the adjacent color. Put the previous yarn tail to the wrong side first. Pick up the corresponding color. Proceed with the color change. Give the yarn a gentle tug before changing colors. I won't repeat this step for every time after this. Insert the hook into the gap. Yarn over and pull through. Draw through all loops on the hook. Finish the slip stitch and color change. Continue crocheting with this new color. Crochet the rest of this row. After the last group pattern, row 12 is finished. Move on to row 13. No new yarn is needed for this row. You'll be using the existing color throughout. We're changing colors as we crochet. The technique and tips for color changes were demonstrated and explained earlier. I won't go into detail here. Start by working with this yarn and crochet 10 group patterns. After completing, switch colors and make one group. When you encounter extra yarns from pulling over, you can tug it in. During crocheting, now, change the color. Continue crocheting and finish the remaining part. Once you've completed the last group pattern, row 13 is now finished. Proceed to crochet row 14. Start by crocheting 3 group patterns. Then, switch colors and make one more repeat. Change color again. Make 6 more group patterns. Once done, you'll need to add color at the adjacent spot. Use the same color as the 4th group for this. Similarly, the previous color will be used in the corresponding position in the next row. Here, use another tail from the same skein of yarn. Or, simply join a new ball of yarn. Make 2 more group patterns. At this point, you'll need to switch colors. Use the same yarn as the previous one. Since this yarn will be used for later rows, we'll reattach the yarn here. Then, continue crocheting with the newly attached yarn. Work your way through the remaining part. Once done, row 14 will be complete. Move on to row 15. Start by making 1 group. For adjacent group, we need to use the neighboring color. Here, the space between the yarn tail and the spot where you need to crochet is about 1 group. And with the same color, we are able to conceal it for a cleaner look. So, for aesthetics, we'll reattach the yarn. Leave a tail about 10 centimeters long. Cut it off. Leave the tail for weaving in later. Then attach the yarn at the corresponding spot. Make 5 groups. Moving down, use the neighboring color to crochet. Again, from where you need to work. The yarn tail is 1 group pattern away. Since this yarn won't be needed in the upcoming rows, leave about 10 centimeters of the tail. Cut it. Then, join the yarn at the point where you're crocheting. After that, continue with 4 more group patterns. Change to the next color. The yarn for the new color is right there. Simply switch colors. Once done, make 1 pattern. Then, change color again. The yarn tail is nearby. Just switch colors directly. Use this color for the remaining row. After completing the last group, row 15 is finished. Move on to rows 16 through 19. While crocheting, when you need to add a new color, join the corresponding color using the same method as before. If your yarn runs out, you can attach a new one using the same technique. If the yarn tail isn't close to where you're working, and won't be needed in the next row, leave a longer tail, then cut the yarn. Reattach the yarn at the correct position to continue crocheting. If the yarn is needed in the next row, simply reattach a new yarn at the appropriate spot. Please refer to the grid chart. Adapt to the situation at hand, and crochet using the corresponding techniques. Once these rows are done, proceed with row 20. Start by following the chart. Work the first 10 group patterns. Here, I've already finished my swatch. After that, continue crocheting with this color. There's a strand of the same color right next to it. Here, you can take the matching color from behind. Leave a long tail, then cut the yarn. Now, use the saved yarn to crochet downward. As for this color below, it won't be needed here or later on. Leave a long tail and cut the yarn. For specific color changes and number of each group, please refer to the grid chart. I won't go into detail here. Once you finish the last group, row 20 will be complete. Then, proceed to crochet the remaining increase area. For any issues you may encounter later on, the solutions have been demonstrated and explained earlier. I won't repeat that information here, just refer to the grid chart. Adapt according to your situation. Employ the appropriate method. Finish the corresponding rows in the increase area. That concludes the explanation for the increase area. Next, we'll work on the decrease area. The decrease area starts from row 41. For better visibility, I'll demonstrate using a solid colored swatch. Since this swatch has fewer rows, I'll focus on the technique. In your actual project, refer to the grid chart for color changes and joining yarn. Start with chaining 3. This area require fewer group patterns. Start with chaining 3. This area require fewer group patterns. Turn the work over. Slip stitch into the gap of the group pattern below. Then make one group. Work the group patterns in each corresponding space after that. Continue until you reach the inner side of the last group. Once you've crocheted the inner side of the last group, slip stitch into the gap. There's no need to crochet beyond that point. As a result, both ends will have one less group. That concludes the instructions for row 41. Proceed to crochet row 42. Using the same method, start with chaining 3. Turn the work over. Slip stitch into the gap of the group below. And make one group. Then work the group pattern in each corresponding spot. After completing the last group, slip stitch into the adjacent group. Leave the remaining stitches unworked. That concludes the explanation for row 42. For the following rows, simply continue as you did for rows 41 and 42. In this final row, there's only one group. After finishing it, slip stitch into the adjacent group. Once completed, fasten off the yarn. Let me demonstrate how to fasten off using this swatch. First, make a chain to secure. Leave a short length of yarn. Then, cut the yarn. Pull it tight. Tuck the yarn tail to the wrong side of the fabric. You can weave in a few more stitches. Trim any excess yarn. And that concludes our explanation on decrease area. Lastly, we need to neaten the yarn ends. I'll demonstrate with this swatch. Key rows or patterns here are not for reference. Thread the tail onto your yarn needle. Then, from above, insert your needle into the loop of the braid. Tighten it up. This is tantamount to tying a knot. Now, tuck the yarn tail to the back. Weave it in securely. For extra security, you can split the remaining tail into 2 halves. Take 1 half and crochet it out from an adjacent stitch. Then, tie the 2 tails together to anchor them. Lastly, combine the remaining tails, and continue weaving them into the fabric. Feel free to weave in a few more stitches. When you have short yarn tails like this, you can weave them in the fabric a few more times. Or, you can simply trim them off to distinguish right from wrong side. Keep the starting yarn tail intact. For the rest of the tails, follow the same method and weave them into the fabric. It's a straightforward technique, so I won't demonstrate it again. That concludes our tutorial on how to neaten up the yarn tails. Up to this point, we've covered crocheting the main fabric piece entirely. With the main fabric complete, we'll move on to crocheting the border. Work around the edges of the fabric, crocheting in rounds. Color changes will be involved, and we'll be using new techniques such as single crochets. Let me demonstrate. I'll demonstrate with this swatch. Hold the fabric with the right side facing you. Locate any group along the edge. Insert your hook into the space between 2 groups. Join the yarn. The method is the same as before. Then, chain 1. This is the beginning chain for a single crochet, which doesn't count as a stitch. Now, make one single crochet in the same spot. Insert the hook. Yarn over. Draw the yarn through. At this point, there are 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again, and draw through both loops once. That completes one single crochet. The braid on the top right counts as its stitch. Chain 3 as a spacer. Then, continue by inserting into the space between the next 2 groups. Make one single crochet. Insert the hook. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over again, and draw through the 2 loops on your hook. Finish the single crochet. Then, chain 3 as a spacer. Continue by inserting into the space between 2 groups and make one single crochet. Another set of 3 chains. Again, insert into the space between 2 groups and make one single crochet. I'll refer to these 4 single crochets and the chains in between as one bridge pattern. Chain 5. Skip one group pattern below. In the space between the next 2 groups behind, make one single crochet. Continue working the same bridge pattern. Individually, insert into the spaces between 2 groups and make 3 single crochets. Between these single crochets, make 3 chains as a spacer. That completes one bridge pattern. Crochet 5 chains behind. Skip another group pattern below. Make a bridge pattern from the next space between group patterns. Alternate between 5 chains and a bridge pattern. For each set of 5 chains, skip one group pattern below. Continue in this manner. Hook all the way to the last group pattern of this edge. Once this bridge pattern is complete, you will reach the last group pattern at the edge. I consider the worked section as one side. Next, crochet a corner. Start with a chain of 5 for transition. Then, insert your hook into the right angle of the group pattern. Pick up any 2 strands. Make one double crochet here. After that, crochet another chain of 5 for transition. That completes one corner. Start the next space between two group patterns. Crochet this side following the same method. It's identical to the first side, so I won't elaborate into details. Once done, work on the second corner. Follow the same procedure as before. Begin with a chain of 5 for transition. Insert your hook into the right angle of the group pattern as the corner. Pick up any 2 yarn strands. Crochet 1 double crochet. Then, make another chain of 5 for transition. That completes the second corner. Continue with the sequence of sides and corners. Work your way through the remaining sections until you're done. Pay attention to the double crochets at the corners. Always insert your hook into the right angle of the group pattern at the corner. Pick up any 2 yarn strands to work with. After completing the last corner, slip stitch into the first single crochet. Locate the stitch of this single crochet. It's the horizontal braid. Insert your hook and make a slip stitch. You can pull this slip stitch tight. This will help distinguish the starting and ending points clearly. That concludes the first round. Now, let's move on to the second round. Continue from the yarn tail you have. Start by making one chain as a beginning chain. Remember, the beginning chain for single crochet doesn't count as a stitch. Then, pick up the next chain space to the left. Make one single crochet there, followed by 3 chains as a spacer. Next, make one single crochet into the next chain space. Again, chain 3 as a spacer. Make another single crochet in the next chain space. You've now crocheted across one bridge pattern. Following that, you'll encounter a large space with 5 chains. In this big chain space, crochet 10 double crochets. For the following bridge patterns, pick up the chain spaces and make one single crochet into each. Between each single crochet, chain 3. When you come across the big chain space of 5 stitches again, crochet 10 double crochets. Continue in this manner. Finish crocheting along this edge. Note there's no chain between the single crochets and double crochets. Once you've completed the side, you'll reach a corner. Here, you'll find 2 large spaces with 5 chains each. Work into each space separately. Make 10 double crochets into each. This completes the corner. Next, follow the same method for the side and corner. Complete the remaining section. After making the last corner, slip stitch into the first single crochet to join. Tighten the yarn. That concludes round 2. Now, we'll work on round 3. It's similar to the previous round. Start by making 1 chain to begin. Then, single crochet into the left side chain space. Follow with 3 chains as a spacer. Single crochet into the next chain space. At this point, you've crocheted over a bridge. For the following double crochet section, individually pick up the double crochet. That's the braid on the top, right? Make a double crochet into each one correspondingly. Once done, you'll reach the top of the next bridge. Pick up each chain spaces and make a single crochet individually. Chain 3 in between. For the double crochets, make 1 double crochet into each accordingly. From now on, whether it's sides or corners, work single crochets and chains above the bridges. Work double crochets above the double crochets. Continue in this manner. Complete this round. After finishing the last corner area, slip stitch into the first single crochet. Tighten the yarn. A color change will be needed next. Cut the yarn here. Start with a chain to secure. Leave a short tail. Cut the yarn. Pull the tail tight. Weave in the ends into the fabric. That concludes the 3rd round. Now, let's move on to the 4th round. Pick up the corresponding color in any double crochet section from the previous round. Join the yarn on the first stitch of the right side. Insert your hook into a double crochet here. Then, make a beginning chain of 3. Remember, this beginning chain counts as 1 double crochet. Follow that with a chain as a spacer. Now, make a double crochet into each double crochet, separated by a chain between each double crochet. As you go, weave in any loose ends. Once you've crocheted above a double crochet section, skip over the chain spaces. Continue working from the next double crochet area. The method remains the same. Make a double crochet into each stitch. Separate these with a chain between each double crochet. Whether it's a side or a corner. For the double crochet sections, always make the double crochets and chains correspondingly. Be mindful that between each double crochet section, there's no chain as a spacer. When you encounter a chain space from the previous row, simply skip it and don't crochet into it. Continue with this technique until you complete the remaining round. After finishing the last area, slip stitch into the beginning chain. Count up 3 chains from the bottom. Pick up 2 strands of that chain. Make a slip stitch. Tighten it up as usual. Lastly, cut the yarn. Tuck in the ends separately into the fabric. That concludes the explanation for the 4th round. I consider the first 4 rounds as one crocheting sequence. In the corner areas, you create these larger waves. From now on, I'll refer to them as the big wave. In the side sections, between the chain spaces, you have small waves. Now, let's move on to the 5th round. The stitch pattern will be the same as the first round, just with a slightly difference in where you insert the hook. Choose any wave. Here, I'm working above a big wave. There are 19 chain spaces in this section. Counting from right to left in the second chain space. Join the yarn. Make 1 beginning chain to start. Single crochet into the same space. Then, chain 3. Skip 1 space to the left. And single crochet into the following space. Chain 3. Continue by skipping 1 space to the left. Single crochet into the next space. Chain 3 again. Skip 1 space behind. Make a single crochet into the next space. That completes 1 bridge pattern. Work 5 chains downward. Then, skip 1 space. In the following space, make a double crochet. Chain 5. You've now completed a corner. Skip 1 space behind. Make another bridge pattern. Follow the same pattern as before. I'll skip the detailed explanation here. After completing this, there will be one space left. Skip that last space. Chain 5 again. After that, you'll have a small wave. Begin at the second space from the right. Make one bridge pattern. Follow the same method as before. Skip one space between each single crochet. Once done, chain 5 again. Above the next small wave, make a bridge pattern accordingly. Repeat the bridge above each following small waves. Above the big wave, make a bridge on both sides separately. Crochet a corner in center. Use the same method as above the first big wave. Between each small waves, make a chain of 5 for transition. Continue with this method, and finish crocheting the remaining part. Slip stitch into the first single crochet when done. Pull the yarn tight. No color change needed here, so do not cut the yarn. That concludes the 5th round. Proceed by crocheting according to the pattern sequence. In the corner areas, make the big waves. Along the sides, crochet the small waves and bridges. Always switch colors on the final round of each wave. Refer to the pattern instruction for specific colors. Now, please follow the previous demonstration and the chart. Go ahead and complete the remaining sections. After finishing the last round of the border, cut the yarn. Lastly, finish the border. Now, let me demonstrate how to finish the border. I'll use this swatch as an example. After completing the slip stitch for the last round, don't pull it too tight. Stretch the loop gently. Leave a bit of yarn tail. Cut the yarn. Locate the double crochet on the left side. Insert your hook from the wrong side into that stitch. Bring the yarn to the back. Then, insert the hook from behind into the braid of the slip stitch. That's the braid here. Insert into the top half of the loop. Draw the yarn through. Give it a gentle tug to adjust. Securely weave in the end of the yarn within the fabric. For extra security, you can split the yarn and weave it in separately. The technique is identical to weaving in ends on a fabric piece. I won't demonstrate that again here. And that concludes our discussion on crocheting the border. If the piece isn't lying flat after finishing, You can use an iron to steam press the backside.